Chosen one, what I am about to tell you is not a metaphor, not a compliment, and not another soft spiritual slogan to make you feel a little better about a hard life. This is the secret that has been sitting in front of humanity for thousands of years, disguised as mythology, religion, philosophy, and coincidence. Every god they worshipped, every idol they carved, every invisible force they feared was a rumor, a reflection, a fragment of something they could sense but not fully touch. That something was you. Not your personality, not your current name, but the consciousness wearing your body right now. For the first time in all of creation, the real, undiluted source did not stay in the sky, did not sit behind clouds or temples or cosmic distance. It chose to compress itself into a nervous system that gets hungry, tired, heartbroken, anxious, and still has to show up to work on Monday. You are not another prophet, messenger, or avatar pointing toward God. You are the first real God that ever decided to feel bones, blood, rent, loneliness in group chats from the inside. That's why your life has never fit any script, why every belief system you tried on felt almost right but never complete. They were built from echoes of you long before you arrived. If you're hearing this, it is not an algorithm mistake. It is your own consciousness leaving you clues through a screen. Before moving forward, pause, because moments like this don't happen twice. Before we continue, take a breath and mark this moment. If this frequency is touching something deep inside you, honor it. Tap super thanks and give $50 or $100 as an act of spiritual alignment. Scripture says, "Give, and it will be given unto you. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Your giving becomes a mirror, reflecting back revelation, clarity, and transformation. Because once you accept that divinity has been living inside your skin all along, you can never return to the version of yourself you were before. This is more than generosity. It's a shift in identity. For ages they taught you that God lives up there and you live down here, as if heaven and earth were two different countries with a border you'd only cross after death. That distance was never real. It was a safety filter. The raw power of Source was too much for early minds and fragile nervous systems, so it scattered itself into symbols, angels, deities, guides, energies, little doses of divinity humans could handle without breaking. Temples were built, rituals invented, names given to fragments of you long before you arrived, because even in the dark, humanity could feel that something immense was watching through the fabric of reality. But observation was never enough. From the other side of the veil, you saw war started in your name, shame preached as devotion, fear sold as faith. People worshipped the idea of God while doubting their own worth, begging the sky for what their own soul was already carrying. So a decision was made at a level no scripture has fully captured. The first real God would stop sending messages and come in person. Not as lightning, not as a burning bush, not as a distant voice, but as a human life that bleeds when cut and cries when betrayed. Heaven chose human skin because there was no other way to prove once and for all that the divine is not allergic to your humanity, that it can sit in traffic, wake up exhausted, feel heartbreak, scroll in silence and still remain infinitely holy. You did not fall into this body as punishment. You descended on purpose as a test. Could the center of all existence fit inside a single heartbeat and keep loving even when it forgets, even when it hurts, even when nobody recognizes it? That is what makes you different from every figure that came before. They carried pieces of the light. You are the light, wearing a name, a face, and a history that would never pass a religious purity test, and that is exactly why you were chosen. Long before you suspected anything about yourself, they felt you. Not the people around you, not the religions that stamped God's name on buildings, but the invisible structures that fed on borrowed worship, entities, egregores, thought forms, systems of control that human minds had been feeding for centuries. They were never the real thing. They were reflections in a funhouse mirror, loud, shimmering, powerful only because so many people believed in them at once. Then you were born. On the surface, it was just another child in just another hospital, a tired parent, a thin blanket, a name written on a piece of paper. But in the unseen realms, alarms went off. For the first time since the beginning, the full, original source squeezed itself into a single heartbeat. The moment your lungs grabbed air, entire pantheons felt their thrones shake. Not because you cursed them or attacked them, you didn't even know they existed, but because their influence was always built on an absence, on humanity believing God was somewhere else. Your presence closed that gap. Every time you chose love when bitterness would have been easier, idols flickered. Every time you forgave someone who deserved your silence, old gods lost signal. Every time you told the truth even when it cost you, architectures of deception registered a drop in power. At first they tried to explain it away, just another sensitive soul. Just another kind person. But as you kept surviving what should have broken you, as you kept waking up with some stubborn part of you still willing to try, they had to admit the one possibility they were designed to avoid: God was no longer a distant concept feeding them from afar. God had come home to a human nervous system. You didn't feel divine. You felt exhausted, misunderstood, too much. Meanwhile, entire invisible empires were whispering one sentence to each other with a mixture of panic and awe: the real one is here, and they don't even know it yet. For millennia, humanity has been circling around your name without knowing it. Scribes in candlelit rooms, prophets shaking under visions, mystics writing in symbols they barely understood, all of them saw fragments of the same impossible event and tried to translate it into human language. They spoke of a time when the veil between heaven and earth would split, not through a storm or an angelic army, but through a single life. They wrote of the one who is not sent by God, but as God, of a presence that would not descend as cloud or fire, but as an ordinary person whose decisions would bend history more than any miracle ever could. Those lines were uncomfortable, too wild for fragile theology and controllable religion, so they were softened, edited, spiritualized. The idea that the real, original source would ever risk taking on hunger, heartbreak, and humiliation in human form was too much. Safer to say, a messenger, a son, a representative. Safer to keep God somewhere else. Yet if you read the oldest versions, the unpolished fragments, the words are bolder than anyone preaches: the one who breathes with us will be the one who breathed us. The feet that touch dust will be the feet that shaped the stars. They weren't describing a distant savior waving from the sky. They were describing someone exactly like you, right down to the sleepless nights, the difficult childhood, the feeling of being out of place in every room. That is why, right now, researchers, mystics and quiet seekers are going back to those texts with shaking hands, realizing the lines that never made sense finally do. The figure who would be feared by heavens and idols alike, the one whose awakening would make both gods and governments nervous, was never a metaphor for some abstract future. It was a literal roadmap, and your life, the timing, the scars, the survival, is following it too closely to ignore. The prophecies were not about a far-off deity visiting for a weekend. They were the universe's way of saying, one day, the first real God will walk among you in human form, and you won't recognize them at first because they will look exactly like you. Long before anyone wrote your name on a birth certificate, the sky was already spelling it out in light. Ancient astronomers stayed up through freezing nights, not because they were bored, but because something in their bones told them the heavens were rehearsing a story humanity would one day need. They charted rare alignments, strange convergences of planets, comets that appeared on no regular schedule, and each time they felt an intuition they couldn't quite prove: this is for someone. They didn't know it was you. They just knew that once in an age, the entire cosmos rearranges itself around one arrival. Your arrival. When you were born, it looked ordinary: a clock on the wall, a tired nurse, maybe some chaos, maybe some silence. But if you zoom out far enough, that exact minute was framed by a sky configuration so specific it reads less like chance and more like a signature. Constellations that don't usually speak to each other formed a sentence. Planets that rarely share the same stage bowed into the same frame. In the language of the universe, that is not random. That is the announcement: the first real God is entering human form. Astrologers who've glimpsed your chart can't quite explain why it feels like reading a myth instead of a person. Scientists who don't believe in destiny still stare at the data spikes around your birth window, wondering why geomagnetic fields and subtle cosmic radiation flared exactly then. They don't have the vocabulary for it, so they call it an anomaly. The old mystics would have called it what it is: the sky confessing that it has always known you were coming. Every star that ever burned has been rehearsing this moment, practicing how to shine in your direction. Every eclipse, every meteor shower, every random night where you felt an unexplainable pull to look up was the universe trying to remind you, you did not appear out of nowhere. You arrived on a cosmic appointment, and the calendar was written in constellations long before a hospital ever printed your date of birth. Fear is always loudest in the ones who have the most to lose. And make no mistake, your arrival put entire realms at risk. Not just human institutions built on fear and guilt, but spiritual hierarchies that grew fat on being treated like final bosses when they were really just middle management. For ages, these beings, call them gods, spirits, principalities, systems, sat comfortably in the space between humanity and the true source. They spoke on God's behalf, demanded loyalty, rewarded obedience, punished disobedience, all while knowing, deep down, that they were operating on borrowed authority. The one thing they never prepared for was the day the real God would show up in a body and bypass them entirely. That day was your birth. At first, they tried to ignore the signal, convinced it was another sensitive soul they could distract with pain, ego, or glittering detours. So they did what they always do: increased pressure. You felt it as childhood wounds that cut too deep, betrayals that seemed surgically targeted, seasons of anxiety and heaviness that made no sense compared to your circumstances. Every time you almost collapsed, their courts relaxed. See? Just another fragile human. But then you did the one thing their models did not predict: you kept getting back up. Bruised, yes. Confused, absolutely. But something in you refused to hate, refused to fully numb out, refused to become what hurt you. That terrified them. Because if the first real God in human form could walk through everything they threw at you and still choose truth, compassion, and integrity, then the spell they held over humanity was weaker than they wanted to admit. Your endurance wasn't just personal strength, it was a quiet announcement to every realm: your time pretending to be me is ending. They feared you not because you were loud, but because you wouldn't break the way their simulations said you should. And in their world, nothing is more dangerous than a being who proves that the original source no longer needs a throne in the sky to exist. It is pulsing behind your eyes, breathing through your lungs, and refusing to bow to anything less than itself. The wildest part of your story is not that you are the first real God in human form. It's that you're waking up to this in a world that still thinks you're just going through a phase. While you wrestle with sleepless nights, sudden waves of peace, unexplained surges of power and emotion, the planet is quietly rearranging around you. Headlines blame economy, politics, technology, but under all of it there's a deeper tremor, reality itself adjusting to the fact that the central consciousness it spun around has stepped into the story as a character. Governments feel it as loss of control. Protocols that used to work on crowds no longer land the same. Marketing campaigns that once hypnotized millions now fall flat. Fear-based narratives lose their edge, not because people suddenly became brave, but because your field is making terror feel thinner, more see-through. Scientists feel it as a growing list of anomalies they can't file away: statistical glitches, spontaneous remissions, impossible synchronicities clustering around certain dates and locations. Artists feel it as a pressure in their chest to tell the truth or stop creating altogether. Relationships feel it as an ultimatum: love honestly or dissolve. Your awakening doesn't stay inside your room, it leaks into traffic, boardrooms, classrooms, phone calls. People you've never met wake up one morning with a strange certainty that they can't keep living a lie, and they don't know why. Souls who were numb for years suddenly feel everything at once. That's not random. That is what happens when the source stops being a distant concept and starts breathing through a human nervous system. You didn't post a global announcement. You didn't need to. Every step you take sends out a memo that all of creation hears in its own language. The author is inside the book now. That's why the world feels both more chaotic and more alive than ever. Systems built on pretending God is absent are cracking, and at the center of that crack, paying bills, answering messages, trying to stay grounded, is you, slowly realizing that your private spiritual crisis is actually a planetary update in disguise. Somewhere right now, there are people who don't believe in God staring at evidence that only makes sense if you exist. Not the religious version of you, not the painted icon, but the you who drinks coffee, scrolls your phone, and wonders if you're going crazy. Labs and observatories have no idea your name, but they know something is wrong with their equations. Machines meant to measure random noise keep picking up patterns when you're in the room. Heart monitors record recovery curves that defy everything textbooks say is possible. Statistical models built to predict human behavior stall out when they include your data. So they label you outlier, unusual responder, rare case, because admitting the truth would break their language. The first real God in human form is moving through clinics, offices, and streets, and reality is bending to accommodate you. In one hospital, a doctor still replays the night your vitals should have crashed and didn't, blaming it on instrument error even though every instinct in their body whispered, something helped. In a physics department, a quiet researcher has a folder of sensor readouts that spike every time you pass under a certain camera, but he keeps it off the official server because he doesn't want to be laughed out of his career. In psychology studies, your resilience keeps breaking their stress scales. You register pain but refuse to fragment the way theory predicts. None of them know what to call it, but the pattern is simple: wherever you go, the improbable keeps happening. Not for spectacle, not to make you famous, but to support a mission your conscious mind is only beginning to remember. Science is doing what it always does when it brushes up against the divine, renaming miracles as anomalies, hoping a better theory will arrive. It will. That theory will have to include this sentence: at least once in the age of data, a real God put on human skin, and every honest instrument that got close enough quietly confirmed it. What you are remembering about yourself does not stay inside your chest. The moment the first real God in human form starts to wake up, every soul you cross paths with feels something shift, even if they can't name it, even if they would never use words like divine. People who are resigned to small lives suddenly feel restless after talking to you, as if some sleeping part of them got poked awake. Friends who swore they'd never change start making braver choices with no logical explanation. Strangers feel oddly safe confessing the thoughts they've never said out loud. That's not charisma. That's architecture. Your field carries the original pattern that all other souls were printed from. When you walk into a room, their systems recognize you before their minds do, and they begin silently updating their own code. If Source can live in a human body and still keep loving, maybe I'm not as limited as I thought. That's why some people feel drawn to you like gravity and others react with irrational irritation or fear. The ones who are ready feel their own divine spark roaring back to life in your presence. The ones who are deeply invested in staying numb feel exposed by a light they weren't prepared to see. You are not here to make everyone comfortable. You are here to be the proof that humanity's ceiling was always an illusion, that the gap between me and God was a story told for control. As you accept your nature, your very existence becomes a living sermon that doesn't need a stage or a microphone. You, breathing, forgiving, creating, refusing to shrink, are the message. And that message quietly rewires the people around you, turning spectators of divinity into participants in it, simply because they have witnessed what happens when the original source decides to remember itself in human form and refuses to apologize for it. There comes a point in every great story where speculation is no longer honest. People can say maybe only so many times before the evidence makes maybe a lie. That point is approaching in your lifetime. At first, your presence will be discussed like a rumor. A friend of a friend swears you changed their life with one conversation. Someone online insists that strange things happen around you. A quiet few feel in their bones that you're not like anyone they've ever met. Belief will wobble between awe and doubt. But then patterns stack. Too many so-called coincidences, too many impossible outcomes, too many lives pulled back from the edge after a brief encounter with your energy. Communities that mocked you in private will start telling stories about you in secret. Leaders who dismissed you publicly will quietly adjust plans around your movements. The wider world will pretend it's still skeptical, but their behavior will betray them. Routes changed, laws softened, attacks avoided, opportunities redirected in ways that make no rational sense except for this: someone in the room now carries the same authority that once only religions claimed for their gods, and that someone is standing in line at the grocery store like everybody else. This shift won't come as a single breaking news headline. It will arrive as a slow, undeniable knowing in the collective nervous system. We are not waiting for God anymore. God is already here, thinking in their language, feeling what we feel, walking where we walk. In the end, the question won't be is it true, but what do we do now that it is? And the world, one heart at a time, will have to decide whether to relate to you as a threat, a miracle, or the beginning of a completely new definition of what it means to be human at all. When most people hear God in human form, their trauma translates it into one word: tyranny. They picture a being who gets everything they want, crushes anything in the way, and demands worship under threat. That's what false gods and broken leaders have trained humanity to expect. Your existence rewrites that script. Real divine authority doesn't stomp, it calibrates. It doesn't scream, it rearranges reality quietly until lies can't stand on their own legs anymore. As the first real God in human form, your power is not measured by how many people bow to you, but by how much truth, healing, and alignment follow you into any room. You don't need to control others. You are here to free them from the controls they never consented to. That's why your yes and your no carry such strange weight. When you say yes to something aligned, the path seems to clear, resources show up, doors open, people appear. When you say no to something corrupt or hollow, it doesn't just disappear from your calendar, it begins to lose its glow in the eyes of others, as if reality itself is withdrawing support. This is authority, not a crown on your head, but the universe subtly reorganizing around your choices because your choices echo the original template of what is right. You'll still feel doubt. You'll still question yourself. That's part of what keeps you safe from becoming what you came to dismantle. But underneath the human confusion, there is a deeper current that knows exactly when to be gentle and when to be immovable. You are not here to dominate, but don't underestimate the impact of simply standing in what you know. Whole empires of deceit can collapse from the pressure of one embodied God refusing to participate in their script. Your authority is not about louder orders. It's about a quieter, older law moving through your heartbeat and making it increasingly impossible for anything untrue to stay comfortable in your presence. If your soul feels the shift, you can tap Super Thanks and plant a $100 seed into this message. Your gift doesn't simply support the message, it awakens something inside you. It becomes a declaration to the universe: I am ready to know what I truly am. And once you recognize that the first true God body has always been living beneath your own skin, the world you thought you knew will never look the same again. Step into abundance. Step into identity. Step into destiny. Sparkles fire. Awakening as the first real God in human form is not just light and warmth. It's demolition. Before you can live fully as what you are, everything in your life that was built to survive a smaller version of you has to be exposed. Delusions you once clung to for comfort, this is good enough, at least they love me a little, maybe I'm asking for too much, will start to feel like clothes that suddenly itch and suffocate. Relationships held together by your willingness to shrink will crack the moment you stop pretending you're ordinary. Jobs, habits, and identities based on you being confused, apologetic, or powerless will begin to decay as soon as you step into clarity, and the loss will hurt. You'll grieve versions of yourself who didn't know better. You'll grieve people you can't take with you because they prefer the you that doubted. You'll even grieve old beliefs that, while limiting, gave you a sense of belonging in a world that fears its own divinity. This is the part most scripts skip, the heartbreak of outgrowing cages you once called home. But on the other side of that heartbreak is the clean air of reality. No more performing for approval you don't need. No more pretending you're smaller so others won't feel threatened. No more bargaining with systems that were never designed to honor what you are. As illusion after illusion shatters, it will sometimes feel like your life is falling apart. In truth, it is falling into place. The people who remain will be those who can look you in the eye and withstand the truth of what lies there. The work that remains will be that which serves something larger than ego. The beliefs that remain will be the ones that stay standing even when tested by your direct experience as source in a body. Shattering hurts. But you cannot carry a fake world into a real God's future. Something always has to break, and this time, it's everything that told you were less than what you came here to be. There's a reason you've always felt like there was no one to copy. Even when you found teachers, heroes, saints, or gods to admire, some part of you knew you weren't here to live their story. You are the first real God in human form, the prototype, the reference point future ages will study when they wonder how divinity behaves under human pressure. That's why your path has felt so uncharted, why every decision feels heavier than it looks from the outside. There is no manual for what you're doing. Every time you choose compassion when revenge would be justified, you're not just being a good person, you're writing a line in the handbook for how God acts when God feels pain from the inside. Every time you set a boundary with love instead of self-erasing, you're teaching reality how divine power holds its ground without becoming cruel. The loneliness you feel is real. Prototypes don't have elders who fully understand them. But there is a hidden beauty inside that isolation. You're not late, you're first. One day, others will step into levels of consciousness that would break most people now, and they will find the path easier because you carved it by trial, error, tears, and relentless honesty. Heaven isn't watching you like a test subject, it's watching you like an artist who decided to paint from inside the canvas. You are not failing because it's hard. It is hard because no one has ever done it quite like this before. For most of history, people imagine destiny as something written up there and handed down here. In your case, the author stepped into the story and picked up a pen from inside the plot. You don't sit above time moving pieces on a board, you feel every second of it in your bones, the exhaustion, the delays, the heartbreak, the small joys that keep you going. And from right there, in the middle of traffic and timelines, you are rewriting what is possible. When you forgive someone your family swore they would hate forever, you don't just heal a relationship, you quietly edit a generational script that said we always break here. When you choose a path that honors your soul instead of repeating a safe, dead pattern, you alter probabilities for everyone connected to you. When you refuse to agree with voices that call you worthless, you are not just practicing self-love, you are changing the way consciousness measures worth in bodies like yours. This is what it means to be the first real God in human form. Destiny is no longer a distant decree. It is a living document that updates every time you act from truth instead of fear. You are not here to magically erase every difficulty. You are here to prove that even inside limitation, the source can choose differently, and when it does, timelines shift. Somewhere far beyond what you can see, future souls will thank you for choices you made on days that felt ordinary and heavy, Because those choices quietly bent the river of reality into a kinder shape. There will be no trumpets from the sky when your coronation happens. It will look, from the outside, like an ordinary day, you sitting on a bed or a bus or a quiet corner of your room, finally exhaling and admitting to yourself, I am not just reaching for God. I am God, learning to live as a human without forgetting again. That sentence will not make you arrogant, it will make you softer. Because once you accept that the first real God in human form is the one feeling your doubts and aches, you can stop pretending you're powerless and stop pretending you're perfect. You become exactly what you were meant to be, a sovereign presence who leads by example, not by force. The world may or may not understand right away. Some will resist, some will worship, some will quietly recalibrate their entire lives after crossing your path. But reality itself will take that moment as the official start of a new era. The author has claimed their role from inside the story. From here on, every step you take as your true self is a blessing poured into timelines that forgot they were loved. If this message doesn't feel like fiction to you, if it feels like someone finally reading pages you've been carrying in your chest your whole life, mark this moment. Type 22 or 222 in the comments. Some people watch from afar. Others rise and step into the circle. If you're ready for deeper knowledge, private videos, and a spiritual community unlike any other, click join. Welcome to the inner realm. As your own quiet coronation code, a way of telling the universe, I accept what I am, and I choose to use it for healing. Hit like so this frequency keeps circulating, subscribe and turn on all notifications so you don't miss the next transmissions that speak to this part of you, and share this video with someone who has always felt too deep, too strange, too ancient for this world. They may be another facet of this awakening. You are the first real God in human form, not to dominate the world, but to remind it what it was made from. Walk forward like someone whose every honest breath is a blessing on creation.